This is because the evacuation of London is not a possibility. Not unless we begin now, and the repugnant and villainous Wolf has promised to strike immediately should we do so. Maps and other emergency materials were then distributed around the room. It seemed to me that the mood was as low as it could possibly go. As I sat there looking at the paperwork, Martin Lodge came up to me. "We got a call from the Wolf," he said in a whisper. "You'll appreciate this. He says he likes our plan very much, and he agrees it's hopeless to try and evacuate London, but suddenly there was a terrible explosion in the building. Chapter 64. When I finally made it downstairs to the site of the bombing, I was stunned by the unbelievable scene of chaos and confusion. The world-famous Scotland Yard sign in front had been completely blown away. There was rubble and a smoking hole where the Broadway Road entrance had been. The remains of a black van were embedded in the sidewalk outside. A decision had already been made not to abandon the building, to hold our ground. I thought that was smart, or at least courageous. A couple of dozen men and women were already viewing a videotape in semi-darkness when I arrived at the crisis center. One of them was Martin Lodge. I took a seat in back and began to watch. I looked down, and my hands were trembling. The film segment showed Broadway that morning, the usual armed policemen on duty outside the huge, imposing building. A black van appeared, driven at reckless speed the wrong way down Caxton Street, opposite the main entrance to Scotland Yard. It roared straight across Broadway and crashed into the barrier erected at the entrance. Almost instantly there was a fiery explosion. It was silent on the film. The whole building was illuminated. I heard someone speak from near the front of the room. Martin Lodge had taken the floor. "Our enemy is truly a terrorist and obviously single-minded. He wants us to know that we are vulnerable. I think we've got the message by now, don't you? It's interesting that no one was killed this morning, other than the driver of the vehicle. Maybe the Wolf has a heart after all." A voice came from the back of the room. "He doesn't have a heart. He just has a plan." The voice, which I almost didn't recognize, was my own.
Chapter 65.
Chapter 65. I worked at Scotland Yard for the rest of the day and slept on a cot there that night. I woke at 3 in the morning and went right back to work. The second deadline would run out at midnight. No one could begin to imagine what would happen then. At 7 that morning, I was in cramped quarters inside an unmarked police van headed to an estate in Feltham, out near Heathrow Airport. I rode with Martin Lodge and 3 of his detectives from the Met. We had recently been granted special permission to carry guns on this assignment. That was better. Lodge explained the situation during the ride. "Our men, along with Special Branch, are all over Heathrow and the surrounding areas. We're working with the airport police, too. One of our people spotted a suspect with a missile launcher on the rooftop of a private home. We have surveillance there now. We don't want to go in for obvious reasons, made only too clear yesterday. He's bound to be watching the neighborhood. I wouldn't doubt it for a minute." One of the other detectives asked, "Do we have an idea who it is inside the house, sir? Have we sussed out anything at all?" "The house is rented. It belongs to a property developer. Pakistani, if that means anything. We don't know who the tenants are yet. The house is a few hundred yards from the runways at Heathrow. Need I say more?" I looked over at Lodge, who had his arms wrapped tightly around his chest. "Very nasty stuff," he said. "Understatement of the year, right, Alex?" I've had that feeling for a while. Ever since I first encountered the Wolf. He enjoys hurting people. You have no idea who he is, Alex? What makes him this way? He seems to change his identity on a regular basis. He, or she. We got close a couple of times. Maybe we'll get lucky now. It better happen soon, Lodge said. We arrived at our destination in Feltham a few minutes later. Lodge and I met up with SO-19, British Specialists Operations, who would execute the raid. Police surveillance had video monitors set up inside several nearby buildings. Tape was being shot from half a dozen different cameras. Like watching a movie. Nothing we can do to influence the action, Lodge said after we'd studied the videos for a few minutes. What an impossible mess. We weren't supposed to be there. We'd been warned against it. But how could we go away? Lodge had a list of all the flights scheduled into Heathrow that morning. In the next hour or so, more than 30 flights would be arriving. The next few were from Eindhoven, 3 from Edinburgh, 2 from Aberdeen, then a British Airways flight from New York. Serious discussions were being held about halting all flights into both Heathrow and Gatwick, but no decision had yet been made. The jet from New York was due in 19 minutes. One of the police pointed. "There's someone on the roof! There! There he is!" 2 monitors showed the rooftop from opposite angles. A man in dark clothing had appeared. Then a second man, this one carrying a small surface-to-air missile launcher, came out of a hatchway. "Fucking hell," somebody hissed. Tempers were running very high now. Mine, too. "Reroute all the flights now! We have no choice," Lodge barked. "Do our snipers have these 2 bastards covered?" Word came back that SO-19 had the rooftop covered. Meanwhile, we watched the 2 men get into position. There could be little doubt now that they were there to bring down a plane, and we were watching the frightening scene without being able to stop it. "Assholes!" Lodge swore at the monitors. "Not going to be anything for you bastards to shoot at. How do you like that?" "They look Middle Eastern to me," said one of the other detectives. "They certainly don't look Russian." "We don't have the go-ahead to shoot," a man wearing headphones announced. "We're still on hold." "What the bloody hell is going on?" Lodge complained in a high-pitched voice. "We have to take them out. Come on." Suddenly there were gunshots. We could hear them on the video. The man with the launcher on his shoulder went down. He didn't get up, didn't move at all. Then the second suspect was hit. 2 clean headshots. "What the hell?" someone shouted in the van where we were watching. Then everyone was cursing and yelling. "Who gave the order to shoot? What's going on here?" screamed Lodge. Word finally came back, but nobody could believe it. Our snipers hadn't made the hit. Somebody else had shot the 2 men on the roof. Madness. It was total madness. Chapter 66. Everything was a wild ride like nothing anyone could imagine, like nothing anyone ever had imagined. The latest deadline was hours away, and nobody in the rank and file knew what was happening. Maybe the Prime Minister knew something. The President? The Chancellor of Germany? Every passing hour just rubbed it in for us. Then it was the passing minutes that hurt. There was nothing we could do except pray that the ransom would be paid. Soldiers in Iraq, I kept thinking to myself. That's what we're like. Observers of absurdity. Back in London, at one point in the late afternoon, I took a brief walk down near Westminster Abbey. There was so much powerful history on display in this part of the city. The streets weren't deserted, but traffic was very light around Parliament Square, with few tourists and pedestrians. The people of London didn't know what was happening, but whatever it wasn't good. I called my house in Washington several times. Nobody answered. Had Nana moved? Then I talked to the kids at their Aunt Tia's in Maryland. No one knew where Nana Mama was. Another thing to worry about. Just what I needed. There really was nothing to do but wait. The waiting was frustrating and nerve-wracking. Still, no one had a clue what was going on. And not just in London. In New York, Washington, and Frankfurt. No announcement had been made, but the rumor was that none of the ransoms would be paid. In the end, the governments weren't willing to negotiate, were they? They couldn't give in to the terrorists, not without a fight. Was that what came next? The fight? Once again, the deadline passed, and I felt as if we were playing Russian roulette. There were no attacks in London, New York, Washington, or Frankfurt that night. The wolf didn't retaliate right away. He just let us stew. I talked to the kids at my aunt's house and then, finally, to Nana. Nothing had happened in D.C. so far. Nana had gone for a walk in the neighborhood with Kayla, she told me. Everything was fine there. Walk in the park, right, Nana? Finally, at 5 a.m. in London, most of us went home to get some needed rest, if we could sleep. I dozed for a few hours, then the phone rang. Martin Lodge was on the line. "What's happened?" I asked as I sat upright in my hotel bed. "What has he done?" Chapter 67. "Nothing's happened, Alex. Calm down. I'm downstairs in the hotel lobby. Nothing's happened. Maybe he was bluffing. Let's hope so. Get dressed and come for breakfast at my house. I want you to meet my family. My wife wants to meet you. You need a break, Alex. We all do." How could I say no? After all that we'd been through in the past few days? Half an hour later, I was in Martin's Volvo headed out to Battersea, just over the river from Westminster. Along the way, Martin tried to prepare me for breakfast, and for his family. We both wore our beepers, but neither of us wanted to talk about the wolf or his threats. Not for an hour or so, anyway. The wife is Czech, Klara Czernohorska, born in Prague, but she's a real Brit now. Listens to Virgin and XFM and all the talk shows on BBC Radio. She insisted on a Czech breakfast this morning, though. She's showing off for you. You'll love it. I hope so. No, I think you will, Alex. I thought so, too. Martin was actually smiling as he drove and talked about his family. The eldest of my brood is Hannah. Guess who chooses the names in our family? Hint, the kids are Hannah, Daniela, and Joseph. What's in a name, though? Hannah is obsessed with Trini and Susanna on the TV show What Not to Wear. She's 14, Alex. The middle child, Danny, plays hockey at Battersea Park, and she's also crazy about ballet. Joe is mad about football, skateboarding, and PlayStation. That just about covers it, don't you think? Did I mention that we're eating Czech for breakfast? A few minutes later, we arrived in Battersea. The lodge house was a Victorian red brick with a slate roof and largish garden. Very neat and nice, proper, appropriate for the neighborhood. The garden was colorful and well-tended and showed that somebody had his priorities in order. The whole family was waiting in the dining room, where the food was just being laid out. I was formally introduced to everyone, including a cat named Tigger, and I immediately felt pretty much at home, as well as missing my own family, feeling a sharp pang that stayed with me for a while. Martin's wife, Klara, identified the food as it was laid out on the sideboard. Alex, these are kolache, pastries with a cream cheese center. Roelike, rolls. Turka, which is Turkish-style coffee. Parek, 2 kinds of sausage, very good, a specialty of the house. She looked at the eldest daughter, Hannah, who was a neat blend of her mother and dad. Tall, slim, a pretty face, but with Martin's hooked nose. Hannah? Hannah grinned at me. What kind of eggs would you like, sir? You can have veca na mleko or michana veca, smażena veca, if you like. Omeletta? I shrugged, then said, Michana veca. Excellent choice, said Klara. Perfect pronunciation. Our guest is a born linguist. Good. Now what is it? I asked. The food I ordered. Hannah giggled. Just scrambled eggs. Perfect with the rohaliki and parek. Yes, the rolls and sausage, I said, and the girls clapped for my show-off performance. It went that way for the next hour or so, most pleasantly, with Clara asking a lot of informal questions about my life in America, while telling